Hi, and welcome to How to Run for Office, a complete and free course for first-time candidates. I am Dr. Allison Stephens, and this is Module 1, the Starter Kit. Before I forget, go ahead, like and subscribe. Want to make sure that you get everything, all the resources, all the modules available, things that continue to be available for this online course. And so we're going to start with our Module 1, which is the Starter Kit. Just to give you a little bit of background about me, I have run for office. I have won, I have lost, I have served in office. And so I will be bringing not only my scientific kind of perspective, which you can learn more about on the Color Lens YouTube page with the strategic steps framework, but really also bringing in some of my lived experience and some of my lessons learned from being engaged in the political process for a couple of decades now. So we're going to go ahead and get started with why run for office. We're going to talk about where you would run, how you fit in. We're also going to talk about how to run the actual campaign, and then who you are, your voice. And again, this is the starter kit, so it's a little bit more comprehensive, but you certainly get additional information that's really critical and important by going forward to the other modules. So you ever look at your community and think, I could do better. You start thinking about a solution when you're watching the news or you're thinking about how you can make real change. Well, that is really the bedrock of public service. And it's really important to think of this as public service. So what is elected office? And again, you can see I have right there on the left-hand side that lived experience, right? When you're bringing your experience to be able to serve your community or serve the public. So most of the changes that we see um, in our, social systems, our society are really driven by people. So for example, the civil rights movement, right? You had a group of people who were highly organized, who were going out and, doing the marches, having certain meetings, doing lawsuits, coordinated. And so that ends up leading us to the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act. So it is that kind of power that we're talking about that is within the hands of citizens, within the hands of the people that actually creates change, and it also creates the momentum for someone who is in office to be able to um, create those changes in a policymaking or legislative way. So, or even judicial decisions, depending on what office you choose to run for. So what I want to highlight here is you may go through this course and you may go, oh, no, 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 running for office isn't for me. But there's a role for everyone. If you're interested and you're thinking about how you want to serve your community, maybe you're one of these people. Maybe you're one of the people who organizes. Maybe you're someone who works on a campaign. Maybe you're someone who's, kind of applying pressure or going in and educating elected officials about different issues because just so you know, if you're going to be running for office, there is absolutely no way that you're going to know about every single issue that's going to come across your desk. And so you end up relying on people who you think are experts, either through their lived experience and or through their training, their professional experience to be able to give you that information. Now, oftentimes we say, oh, that's those lobbyists and special interests. The reality is that if you're like me, you don't know everything about everything. And so you do have to get that information from somewhere. So if you feel like maybe running for office isn't for you, maybe you're one of those people who's really advocating and educating elected officials. Maybe you're someone who's coordinating others and helping to organize people in the public to go out and protest or do some sort of meeting or go give public comment at a city council meeting that will help inform the decisions that are being made. Now, here are the ladders of participation, and this is just how you move up through citizen engagement. And I do want to just emphasize here that most people don't even vote. So when we talk about the non-participation part of this at the lowest rung, that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about the level of actual participation. So the level of participation that is non-participation is really just kind of being manipulated. Um, that can be where people are, it becomes very like almost therapeutic, right? Like they are being told. And you can see those little marionette strings. And so that is at the lowest rung. The tokenism, I think a lot of us are familiar with because it's when you are in the room and you might be providing information, you might be providing insight, you might be consulting, but you don't actually have any real power. And I want to just really caveat that concept of power with influence, right? So maybe you don't have any real power or influence on the person who has the final decision-making power. Now, citizen power is at the top. That's when you have that partnership. There's delegated power and there's citizen control. And that is really some of these things that we're talking about, but including running for office and being in an elected position. So I want to really distinguish between the tokenism and the citizen power. Certainly, when I was elected, we'd have this situation where individuals would maybe have an advisory board. They put a lot of time, energy, effort, make recommendations to us. And ultimately, we may or may not end up making that same final decision. And that was often taken as tokenism. That is not accurate. It was not tokenism because they actually did have influence over the final decision maker. So there was power, there was influence there. What happens in those scenarios if, for example, you decide running for office is not for you, or to prepare for office, you want to go after an advisory board or some sort of community board? What is happening is the people that you are advising are elected officials. So the individuals, like voters, have actually already delegated authority to them. They've said, hey, here, I'm trusting you with your vote. I want you to go in and make those decisions. And so, even though that person is there and they may rely on you, they may get information, they may get your expertise, and you do have influence, it is inappropriate for them to then go say, oh, the people have delegated me to the authority and are going to hold me accountable for making these decisions. Now I'm going to go turn around and push it off onto someone else. And oftentimes there's information that you may be privy to as an elected official that you just aren't able to share. And so sometimes it can look like, oh, they just don't care. They're not doing this, that we're just tokens. Um, they're not working on this, but sometimes things are not as, corrupt as they seem. So I do want to just start out early. If you're one of those people who believes that all politicians are corrupt, this probably is not the space for you. You cannot walk into any role, even if you're starting at a new job, which is kind of what this is, and go in and say, I know everything. You all are idiots. You're all corrupt. I'm the only good person here, and expect that that's going to work out for you. Oftentimes, what's perceived as corruption or tokenism is actually some of those other nuanced issues. But at the end of the day, I do just want to emphasize that citizen power is that partnership with people, that delegated power and authority, and also citizen control. So you've got to understand also the different levels of government to figure out exactly where you fit. Like, where is your place so that you can make the biggest impact possible? No one is going to take the time, energy, even with your family to run for office and then to serve in office if you don't feel like you're going to be able to have the biggest impact. And also, if you don't feel like you're going to be able to learn and grow to be able to create that greater impact. So, of course, we need to talk about the levels of government. So, a lot of people tend to think about state government when they think about running for office. They do think about like their state legislator. Um, but there's a lot of people at the local level that are handling things that are much closer to you. So like parks, zoning. Sometimes there's like a public administrator when, courts, there are local courts. So there are a lot of things happening at the local level that are very close to you. A lot of those things are dependent upon the state budget. And so that is really where the state legislature should focus. They tend to broaden that a little bit. And I think that's because a lot of people are just so familiar with that don't really get the nuance of the different roles. But when you think about state government, think about things like the budget. And they call that the power of the purse. So there's a lot of authority in saying, hey, we're going to cut off the funding for this. So the other thing is, in understanding like the different levels of government, something like a license would be handled at the state level. So when you go to the DMV, that is a state agency under the executive branch of the state government. Federal is when you start getting into, those national issues, might be something like immigration, even foreign policy. Those are your members of Congress and so forth. So now you might be looking at this and just wondering, like, do what? Where do I fit in? Do I have what it takes? So let's actually stop and look at what it takes. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the basic essential skills that you do need to be able to run for office and then hopefully to be successful once you're in office. And by successful, I mean representing and carrying out the needs and the demands of the community or the constituency that you represent. So first, communication, right? You want to make sure that you're communicating clearly. And one thing that I had to learn was I was saying things a certain way and I knew what I was saying. And I go, someone misinterpreted it. It was like, that's just not what I said, right? I think we've all had that feeling, especially in our interpersonal relationships. Like, no, that's not what I said. Here's what I had to get that it's less about what I said and more about what they heard. So it doesn't really matter what I said if what they heard was something different. My job is to figure out to get them to hear what my intended communication or message is. I need you to receive the message. So I've got to be able to adapt my communication to get you there. Now, the other thing that's really important is also reading. Reading is essential. There's a lot of reading that has to happen when you run for office, and certainly a lot of reading that has to happen when you're in office, like a lot. Now, if that's not your strong suit, say you happen to have a, learning disability or it's just not your area, that's fine. You can use workarounds, accommodations, modifications, there's all kinds of ways of doing it, especially now with AI being able to do summaries. Or I sometimes will plug things in and say, hey, explain it to me like I'm a fifth grader and have it like re-explain something when I'm like, that doesn't make sense, right? There's also for people with visual impairment, there are screen readers. There's also read aloud which sometimes I do when I'm trying to get through dense documents. I can just pop these on and be doing dishes or whatever it is I need to do and listening to that information instead of having to, take time and sit and process everything, which I still do sometimes. Sometimes I'm reading on the screen. Sometimes I've got hard copy and I'm scratching through things and making notes and annotating, whatever it takes. Please know you do need to read information. There's a lot of reading involved. So it doesn't really matter whether you're a business owner, a teacher, an artist, a stay-at-home parent, which we see over here on the left. You can make that connection. You can cross the bridge over into public service. And those are factors that are really important because people connect to those. So now we need to talk about how do you actually run? Like, what does that mean? And this is just the brass tacks of like, what steps do you take? And I remember going through this like extensive 6 month training, learned all of these really wonderful skills, understood a lot about kind of the mechanisms of running for office. But what I didn't know is like this really basic stuff of like, okay, do I have to form an LLC or something? How do I actually put this thing together? And so that's one thing is you do need to form some type of legal entity. Um, it's a political committee or a similar structure, association, and you can talk to the Secretary of State's office, contact your local election department to find that information out. But the next step, which is it is kind of connected because when you go to open your bank account, sometimes they'll say, hey, we need this paperwork in order to be able to open this bank account. You really need to go in person. And I am definitely that millennial that is very comfortable with just online everything. And also going and sitting down and talking to whomever account person or the branch manager in the bank is really important when it comes to this particular account. So you want to keep all of your campaign financials separate from your personal funds. Let me say it again. Keep all of your campaign finances completely separate from your personal funds. That is why you need to open a bank account immediately. And they will likely say, we need articles of incorporation, or whatever that document is. So the two kind of go hand in hand. One can inform the other. And then the last part, of course, is filing for office. So when you go to run for office, it's not like, oh, you just put out like a video and go, hey, I'm running, where you go, give some speech, hey, I'm running, and get people together. You actually have to go and file paperwork and actually officially declare your candidacy. That is when you're actually a candidate, not before. Okay, so now you are official, right? The real work starts, and that is really called field organizing. And that's really when you're doing the boots on the ground work. It's going to build your grassroots momentum and help you connect directly with the voters. And honestly, this is really the heart and the soul of any winning campaign. Forget about big splashy TV ads. Don't even think about that stuff. This is all about getting to people who can vote for you one conversation at a time. So I just want to throw in here this idea of grassroots that can be, we hear it all the time. Everyone doesn't use that kind of terminology. Those are everyday people. So you're engaging with everyday people. The other term that people use is like grass tops. And so that might be someone like me who maybe people know of, or they may trust when it comes to um, politics. They It could be a local pastor. Like those are people who are grass tops. And so they have some level of influence, with the grassroots. So your field organizing is really focused on grassroots, but just want to make sure that you know that terminology. If someone ever says it about grass tops, you know what that means. When you do your field organizing, there are a few ways that you can reach people. And you've seen this probably if you vote, then somebody's coming around. They're either calling or texting you, as you can see there on the bottom left hand, hey, I'm so and so running for this office, or hey, I'm volunteering for so and so. You can get your family, you can get your friends. We'll talk a little bit more about staffing, but that's one way of reaching people. You can also knock on doors. Um, so going to someone's home, just knocking on the door, that guarantees one that it's somebody who actually lives in your district that you're reaching out to. Sometimes the voter files that, by the way, you get from your local election department, sometimes those can be old, or there can be discrepancies. So if you're knocking on the door, you know that you're reaching someone who lives in that community and in your district. So therefore, that person likely will be able to vote for you. Now, the other thing to remember is that you need to track everything, every way which you're reaching out to someone. It has to be tracked or you will lose track. And there's a lot of really fancy, really expensive software out there. If you don't have all that, or if that's not where you want to put your resources, a Google Sheet is just fine. There's nothing wrong with utilizing old school, affordable resources instead of the latest fancy schmancy software. Now there is some wonderful software out there if you can afford it. Um, Certainly do that. Also know that you can get started this way and then transfer that data at a later time. The other thing that I just want to say as a quick note, and this is a quick tip, and hopefully, something that you find useful is when you're doing this, like knocking on doors or you're meeting people. I don't know about you, but sometimes you'll come home during election season, you have all this stuff at your door. And for the most part, especially if it's flyers and door hangers and all these things, you're tossing them. You're not going to keep them. And it really does take about 7 times of someone seeing your name for them to connect the dots and even remember. So they're flipping through, and if they don't even flip through and they just take the stack and throw it out, that's not going to be working in your favor. So my suggestion is if you can put those resources, especially if you don't have a lot of funding at first, maybe not in the software, but in something that's relatively affordable that is a leave behind. So my suggestion is something like a refrigerator magnet, because then every single time that person goes in the refrigerator, they're going to see your name. They're going to glance at it. And most people need these because you're totally inundated with just random paperwork. The paperwork for the doctor's office next week. The kids have something that's due. It's all stuck there right on the refrigerator. And so they're seeing your name, and especially if you put some sort of essential information on it, like one side is your information, the other side is maybe emergency phone numbers, right? Something that's going to be useful to them. Chip clips are another good one. So those are the little clips that you can put, branded information, but they close like potato chip bags. Those are the kinds of things that people are going to see repeatedly. So you're going to get to that seven repeated um, times of seeing your name. You're going to get to that number seven pretty quickly. If you're leaving something behind, you're not even guaranteed that they're going to bother to look at it to even get that one time of seeing your name to accumulate to seven if you just leave something that is more like paper on their door. So that is my little insider tip. I think it's the opening. Okay, so listen up because this is probably going to be the most critical, important, um, practical piece of advice that I'm going to give you. Do not spend any time, energy, or money talking to people who cannot vote for you. That may sound silly. You will see that it happens very easily. It can end up taking lots and lots of your time, especially when you start getting invitations. Because after you file, people are going to see that you filed. They're going to have your contact information. There are people who put on events. There are people who throw a candidates forum. There are all kinds of things that will come your way. There are community events, community activities. If you are not going to be seeing people who actually live in your district and actually can vote for you, do not do it after a certain point. It is okay at first to go out, meet people, present yourself. You don't want to be MIA, right? But at a certain point, after you've made a couple of those rounds, you continuing to go to all those events and campaign to the other elected officials who are also running for office or candidates who are in that room isn't helping you win any votes. Focus on people who can vote for you. Now, who you are. Um, your voice is what's important here because obviously you're an individual. You're the one who's been saying, hey, I think I could do something better here. I think I have good solutions. I think I'm capable of contributing and serving my community in this way. So, what you don't want to do is then water that down and not be yourself. Obviously, you've got to be appropriate, right? But you still need to be who you are. Your voice and perspective are your greatest assets. So that's why you've been seeing this thread of me talking about lived experience here and there, because otherwise you're just like everyone else, right? You need to embrace the unique qualities that you're bringing, because that's what's going to make people want to vote for you. And that's it. That's all. So it's really tempting to go in and try to mask, right? Because we see people and we think, oh, that is what an elected official looks like. This is what a candidate looks like. And I can even remember, there were people, important people to me in my life who were like, oh, no, you shouldn't be wearing that. You have to wear a pantsuit. Don't you see, so and so elected woman elected official? This is what they do. That doesn't look professional. And the whole thing is that, when I was running, I was young and my children were 5 and 7. I was divorced and I, worked every day, and people really related to that. It was the point that I wasn't the politician. I didn't represent what had always been. I was somebody who understood life and what was happening for the people in my district. And so people related to that. They respected what I had to offer. They appreciated it. And so therefore, they trusted me with their votes. And so you can see people connect to you when you are who you are. So I just want to put this out there because I think sometimes people think those masks are fooling someone and they're not. Nobody, like in the end, nobody wants to work with someone who's shady and inconsistent. Nobody. They're not going to vote for you. The people who are in office don't want to work with you. It's just not going to work. So, it, really like, especially for people who come from underrepresented backgrounds, there is pressure both internally and socially. And there are a lot of systems in place to tell you that you have to change who you are. And again, I'm not saying you need to be inappropriate, but you don't need to fit some kind of mold. The exact opposite is what's true. So you really have to get a good sense of who you are. What are your values? What are you bringing to the table? What are your attributes, your qualities? And you see in the mirror, there's that more singular view of who you are, where you come from, what your experience is. And then on the right side there, looking at where you fit in your community, what you can bring to your community, how your community is engaging. And so it's really taking that look in the mirror at yourself to understand who you are. And what's motivating you to want to run for office? Is it service? So I just want to reiterate the point that I made earlier that most people don't actually vote. And it might be because they don't see you. They don't see themselves represented. And so being, who you are is really important to be building trust. And you'll notice I use the terminology of people trusting me with their vote. They're trusting you with their vote. So you need to be able to build that trust. And people can usually spot from a mile away when you're not being yourself, when you're trying to be fake or hide important parts of who you are. It could be that it's because they haven't seen these three candidates, um, as options, that's why they're not voting, or maybe seeing these three candidates is what draws them in. They see someone who, looks like them. They see someone who also understands and has had to get whatever accommodations for their disabilities to participate. They see someone who has this deep experience and whatever that is, or this lived experience. So it really is important to embrace your identity and who you are, and going back to that, looking in the mirror, getting really clear on those values, getting really clear on what you bring, and then bringing it. That's what's going to win you votes. So this is the overall, training, and really gives you that starter kit on what to do to be able to get your campaign going and how you can conduct a campaign. We still have a few more modules left, but hopefully this gives you enough to understand whether you're really interested in doing this. You can certainly keep going, keep continuing as you flesh this out for yourself. I would encourage you to do, again, some of those personal exercises and figuring out who you are, what's motivating you, but then also what are the offices that are available, looking at those different levels of government and the things that we talked about so far. So I just want to leave you with this question. Your community is waiting. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed in the community. You obviously feel that you have something to offer your community. So start thinking about it. What will you do? And don't forget to, of course, like and subscribe. Make sure to watch all the other videos in this free online training. It's pretty comprehensive, and you'll get to see the ongoing videos just in general as I continue to post bonus materials. And also, I will be releasing additional free courses on the topic of running for office and how you actually get to that point of winning.